The fact that we've survived this far is a miracle. In the Doomvault, we are steadily moving from one challenge to the next, going deeper and deeper into this Ogdru lair. And now we can hear the drums and chanting of this ritual that is underway that we know that we need to stop. And here in the penultimate room, the twin guardians stand in our way. This second to last room of the Doomvault is a bit of a challenge, and in all honesty, I have been thinking a lot about it because it is one room that I have a real struggle not nerfing, because as we discuss the challenges here, it is quite daunting and it seems impossible for players to get past as you read through it. But at the same time, I have seen it time and time again, players find a way to get past it and to get past what can be seen as an impossible challenge. So let me show you what I mean. As we look into the Doomvault itself, we've gone through the Hag's Roost, the Long Pattern, the Mirror Lake, through Osric's Gate. We've discussed all of that. We are down here at the Guardians, the Twin Guardians chamber. And in the core version, let's get a little, there we go. In the core version, all this it talks about is that the Guardians, these towering statues, blast intruders with hellish beams of magical fire from their stone eyes. They are near indestructible and older than mankind. They can be deceived, not destroyed. Beyond them, a massive door can only be raised from within the far chamber, and monks occasionally walk past, heading to the upper areas. So that's the premise of what we're given. But this room is a beast, depending on how you handle it. So let's break it down, starting with kind of the target, the timers, the threats, and the treats all across the board, how I would do this using the core rules. So we've been running a lot with just the target of 12, which I think is totally fine for this. It's hard enough to raise the target, and if we would do it only if we need to escalate things, or if players are not being challenged enough, or we want to add that tension a little bit. It's one of those levers we can pull from. But let's stick with a classic 12. Some timers that we can play around with is that occasionally monks walk past. So we can roll a d4, and let's say in a couple rounds, we will have some Ogdru monks walk through this chamber. Now, the threat that they can do is that are these guardians, and they blast players with hellish magical fire. So we've got some guardians that are going to blast, fire on the players in some way, dealing magic effort. So that would be if you're running core, it would be a D8, but if you're running Master Edition, you could use a D10. So somewhere between a D8 and a D10. I'd probably go with a D10 there. So we're going to be blasting them with fire. The treat in this room is there is a litter of corpses running throughout this room, and so we would probably have a couple of these skeletons lying around that could be there, as well as it says that there's a massive door on the far side that can only be raised here. All right, so how would I run this? Well, in the past, what ends up happening is that these indestructible guardians essentially blast anything that comes in their way. So the moment a player kind of steps out, blasted with fire. Now, you could make this a save. You could say roll dex to duck behind some rocks, and then they roll dex and see if they dodge. You could have them pull up a shield and take the hit, or maybe they just run across and try to get faster than the what's aiming, kind of just have that blast follow them, and maybe they run past it. That's an okay way of handling it. It is kind of anticlimactic, and it doesn't live up to the penultimate chamber that these guardians are truly meant to be. So what I would probably have you do in some way is these things are going to hit. They need a key of some sort. And as mentioned before, where we kind of talked about you can leave some treats before, like maybe something in Osric's Gate in his chamber might clue you into the Guardians. Perhaps some cultists clued you in. Whatever. Some more details of that are in the Mega Dungeon, which will be our second version here. But however you decide to kind of get across it, what you don't want to do is you don't want to have these Guardians just kind of be like, they kind of fell flat. Like, if you have them rotate and every round they're going to blast a random target, you could do that. And then they make a save, a constitution save or something to reduce the damage by half. You could do that, which has, worked in the past. But essentially what I like to do for, if we were going to run the core version, is just have these guys be firing one magic blast of fire each, have them choose a random target from the players, and then have them make a save for to reduce the damage. But with a caveat, if you're going to have that save that allows them to reduce the damage, what I would have them do is this gate over here needs to be kind of locked. There needs to be some kind of effort challenge behind it. So perhaps there's a heart of effort that they, need to make, or there's 2 hearts of effort that they need to make to like pry it open or pick the lock or whatever. Or the timer that's up here for the cultists, in 2 rounds, they're going to come walking through and the door will open then, but then they'll be faced with a bunch of cultists. And until then, they kind of have to survive this this chamber in some way. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, if going forward is just a waiting game, and if they have to do some hearts of effort here or not, what's keeping them from just standing in this hallway over here, out of danger, not even involved with the guardians at all? Okay, let's bring it back. The invincibles. This is the answer in my head, is having some kind of back pressure. Anytime you have players who like, oh, we don't need to move forward, like we'll just wait it out, or for whatever reason, putting some back pressure on them can help. So using kind of the information from core, what I'd end up doing is, okay, now they've passed Osric Gate, the invincibles are coming down in a couple rounds. The invincibles are going to be moving ahead. So now this is pushing them forward. And now the players have to find out some way that they can stay clear of the invincibles. They have to find some way to cover themselves or defend themselves or dodge or duck and weave away from the magical fire that's happening. They might be able to loot some items. They might be able to buy some time for their big tough guy to, go through the effort, all while they're seeing the Ogdru cultists come through there. And now you can make this room into a much more dynamic space. And especially if the guardians, I know this map shows that like once you get halfway through, they shouldn't be able to reach them because they're getting, fire from their eyes. But perhaps they rotate. Maybe they have, multiple ways that they can fire things. They want to make sure that no matter where they're at, these things could reach at an angle, or maybe not. Maybe you say there's certain angles that they couldn't. So maybe all of the players are going to hide over here where neither of the guardians can get to them. But now they're kind of cornered up, and the invincible is going to be, walking their way and pushing them around. You really want this penultimate room to be a little bit more dynamic, and you want it to be something that prepares them or kind of reduces some of their resources before they go into the final ritual room next. So that's the challenge. And again, using the core rules, you have a lot more wiggle room because there's less detail. So you can find different ways to make this more dynamic, and that's kind of how I like to do it. Now, the real intense portion of this comes from the Mega Dungeon version, as we look at the exact details of what that is presenting. So let's reset the room a little, and we'll go over the Mega Dungeon version, which really presents, like I said, what this room is designed to be, or at least could be in the storyline of the Doomvault, and it gives you that clear idea of why it's so important not to nerf this. Again, it is tough though. So looking at the Mega Dungeon version, it says and introduces the room this way. This megalithic chamber is home to 2 enormous stone heads. Okay, so I'm reading out of this one. They face the rune-carved door to the shattered stairs, the way we just came. Around them are surrounded by countless dead bodies. Their eyes are powerful gems that fire an arcane beam at anything that moves here. Only a key amulet used by Ogdru cultists deactivate them. Okay? So this is where knowing where you were going in the Doomvault and knowing that this is coming up makes your prep, making sure you have ways that you can introduce this earlier on is key. So here's what it continues on. At some point in the previous chambers or descent, heroes should be seen or encountering Ogdru cultists. If any of these are elders or leaders, they would possess a small gem amulet. Anything that moves in this room without such an amulet is vaporized instantly. The beam fires twice each round for a total of 4 blasts. There is no save against this beam, and without an amulet, players will need great creativity to pass these super deadly sentinels. And that's kind of where it's getting with. They're trying to make this very clear. We're in the depths of a cultist lair. They want the guardians, the last line of defense before they get to the ritual chamber, to be super deadly, and it makes sense story-wise. Yeah. So, still at a target of 12. The timers that we're dealing with is after D4 rounds, a group of cultists will appear from the Ogdru chamber beyond, same as we had before. And then they're going to cast Magic Missile and Giant Tentacle. So in a couple rounds, you're going to suddenly have a group of cultists out here blasting the players with Arcane Missile and Giant Tentacles to really muck up the works. And if they don't have a amulet, you could throw in a leader here as well, which would give them even bigger boosts. Like I would increase them, have them some extra spells or whatever. All right, the threats that they have to deal with are the patrol and the statue beams, which are obviously the big threats. But here's where it is. The corpses here for the treats can be searched for D4 ancient loot, which is awesome. Ancient loot is really good. I know it sounds ancient, but a lot of the really nice kind of middle tier loot is found in the ancient loot table, so definitely use that one. Shabby is just a kind of a side note. I use shabby loot pretty much like 75% of the time. Shabby is what I roll on, and then ancient ends up being about 20% of the time, and then between magic and epic is about 5 times. Maybe I'll throw in a bizarre every now and then with a curse, but yeah, only about 5% of the time I'm rolling on anything other than ancient or shabby, just because they're so good. Now the real prize is the gleaming gems, which are up here in the the source of those magic beams that are happening. So these are huge treasures, and you can make that very clear that these things are huge magical items as well as worth quite a bit. But then this is where you can get more details on the actual beam that's happening and why this is so deadly. Each one contains a death ray spell as used by an eye beast. And then if they were to somehow get this gem, you can use this spell by making a hard intelligence roll when you have it as a loot item. And then failure sends the deadly beam in a random direction, and then prying the gems loose requires tools or hard strength. So tools and hard strength. So these are not just something they can go pick up. They have to spend some time and effort, but you can be very open with them that if you can claim this, you get this spell. You'll have it as a loot item. It's intense. And for context, the eye beast is, I just did it. The death ray details for that is specifically drops its target to 0 HP, can also annihilate any inanimate object it hits. That's it. It just drops the target to 0 and can annihilate inanimate objects. Like, that's what's happening. And so when it says that there's 4 beams happening every round, that's what's making this room so deadly. Is these players can walk out, and if they don't have some way to deactivate those beams or some way to deactivate the statues, then they're just going to get blasted with a death ray and they're at 0 HP. Keep in mind though, 0 HP is not the end. In ICRPG, it's recommended that you're dropping players pretty often, and so dropping a player is not the end of the world. Dropping to 0 HP is not a TPK. There is still a chance for a miracle. There's still a chance that your players can get your body and, don't die on me, man, save you, stop the death timer, heal you, do whatever. Especially when you get some magic users, when you get some items. It is not the end. But to get past this, you have to be clever, especially when there's 4 beams going off each round. So, how could we do that? Well, the key amulet is kind of the key to this. And so one, as you're running the Doomvault, making sure that you are introducing some Ogdru cultists earlier on. So like in Osric's Gate, in the Sleeping with the Dead, great place to have a key amulet stashed away. In the Osric's Gate over here, great place to have a cultist kind of show up and potentially grab it. Maybe there's even some in the Mirror Lake where they could interact with or catch up to one or find a leader, kind of show off those things. Like at this point is when I would start dropping a key amulet or two. I wouldn't have like, they're not plentiful enough that every player could have a key amulet. That would kind of defeat the purpose. But maybe they do. Maybe if you run into a bunch of leaders and if they successfully beat leaders and high priests for these cultists, sure, give them all key amulets. But keep them kind of sparse, because perhaps what they need to do is they can use one to get across, and then they're here past the range of the guardians, and now they have to find some way to get it back to the other players, and back and forth, and you can have that kind of challenge or puzzle aspect of it, to how do I get everyone across when there's only one key amulet. And so that can be part of the game there. Or if you get to a point where perhaps if they've looted they've looted 3 of the 4 bodies and they get to the 4th one, having one of them not be a random roll but just having it have a key amulet on it could be a nice way to kind of de-escalate the room if things are getting a little intense. But again, try not to nerf this in that sense. Try not to just take this away from them and make it too easy for them, because all it takes is one portal spell. Whole room just nerfed. Whole one just completely wiped. All it takes is for this wizard to have the portal spell. He can see the far side. He casts portal. They walk through it. And it's over. It's not a bad thing. That's really clever planning. That's great for them for choosing portal. Awesome possum. But it's just a reason why, like, why do I need to nerf this room if that's a possibility on the player side? This room, if you're trying to build into the Doomvault ethos of things, making it so that this room can be an intense guardian, like last stand, last defense for the Ogdru, can really build into the ethos and mythos of the Ogdru, that they take their lair seriously, that they are trying to truly defend something, and make it so that if players can make it across, then like all the more epic. Like they're ragged, the timer's dropping, everything's going on, and they've got to go. In the Mega Dungeon version with this here, if you wanted, you could definitely have an invincible push them forward, spur them on. It may not be necessary with the Guardian's Gate. Like if your players are already moving forward, like it may not be necessary, especially if you also, at this point, I always like to have some kind of world timer show up, which is a world timer is not just like a round by round timer. It's kind of it does count rounds, but it's a timer that tracks world events. And in this case, the world event would be the ritual that's going on in the next room, the summoning of Ogdru and the eventual, death of the 3 kings of Norberg. So at this point, I would put them in and say, in 10 rounds, the ritual will be complete. And that timer will progress, and whatever happens in this room, whatever time they have left as they move to the next room, that timer will still be going on. If they're going pretty fast, you could drop it down to 6, maybe 8. Who knows? Play with your players. But that timer is both for this room to say you've got more time at the beginning of this, you've got to find a way to get across, but the more time you spend in the Twin Guardians room, the less time that you're going to have in the ritual room. And so there is that balancing, there's that pull forward that's spurring them on. And at this point, we're really starting to get pedal to the metal with the ritual and the total adventure. We're really ramping things up. And so use all of the different levers that you have to ramp up the adventure, because the other rooms have been challenging. They've kind of ebbed and flowed, but from this point on, we're just escalating things up. But What do you think? How would you run the Twin Guardian room? How have you run? How have you faced it? How have you defeated it? Let me know what you think of the Twin Guardians room and your war stories for the Doomvault. But we'll look forward to the next and final room of this Doomvault deep dive as we discuss the Ritual Chamber and the end all for this Ogdru Brotherhood. And in the next episode, we're going to have a special as we discuss it on a live paper version of the map, which we got, and it was recently the recent Runehammer. So yeah, definitely check it out. Check out the other videos, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks, everybody.